Hello everyone, friends. My name is Denis Halantsovsky, and today I would actually like to discuss the situation with Ukrposhta. Because literally yesterday there was a message that Ukrposhta changed its logo to a postal horn in the shape of the letter U. And they spent, just imagine, 600,000 hryvnias on this. In total, the company planned to spend 1.2 million hryvnias. We see that, as they say, they managed to save 50%. At the same time, Ukrposhta itself is very... They kind of presented it as if something so cool and so great happened that they needed to be praised for it. Naturally, anyone with sense immediately asked the main question, where from? First of all, how does a state-owned loss-making company have an extra 600,000 hryvnias? And how can a logo even cost 600,000 hryvnias? I'm not even taking that into account. The fact is that on social media, people repeatedly offered Ukrposhta various logo options absolutely for free, and they were no worse than the 600,000 hryvnia logo, and of course all these options were ignored as well. Can a logo cost 600,000? Probably it can. Can a logo cost 600,000? And can a loss-making state-owned company afford such services? Probably at the very least not during wartime. You know, when people are told, let's each chip in 10 hryvnias because there are no vehicles to evacuate the wounded. And on the other hand, we see a completely different reality. When a state-owned company can afford to change its logo for 600,000, could there have been alternatives to this if they really wanted to change the logo so badly? Were such expenses definitely justified? Definitely not. And of course, people immediately started expressing their dissatisfaction on social media. And the head of Ukrposhta, who, let me remind you, earns an insane amount of money, more than most Ukrainians will make in their entire lives. How much does he make in a year, roughly? His name is Smilyanskyi. For those who know and those who don't, he started reacting to the hate on social media in a very, very shameful way, and people began accusing him of corruption. You know, whether there was corruption or not is probably still an open question, but even if there wasn't any corruption, how appropriate is it for the head of a state-owned company, which is running at a loss, to behave like this during wartime? He managed to hold on, he held on, but now the organization is running at a loss. So he held on, and basically he started doing the same thing in response. Again, how appropriate is such a reaction from someone who is essentially a civil servant, a person who runs a state-owned enterprise? He started writing. He replied to some woman saying, if we're thieves, then you're a prostitute, so we're thieves and you're a prostitute. And that's the kind of story that happened. Or later, when he was told that you can't talk to women like that, he said he didn't see a woman there at all. And he also said that some freak accused him of corruption, and he didn't immediately notice what gender the freak was. You know, Ukraine today is a country where some moral norms and these moral foundations no longer exist, but instead there's a cover of some kind of patriotism, right? Because Smilyanskyi puts on an embroidered shirt once a year, speaks Ukrainian with someone, and that's it. He's already considered a patriot, not a draft dodger. And on the other hand, there's some Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainian or Russian-speaking Ukrainian who helps the military, I don't know, helps, for example, dog shelters, but maybe left the country and helps from abroad. And such a person, you know, will be hated, and this hatred towards such Ukrainians will be fueled, and most importantly, they will be called a draft dodger. But Smilyanskyi, who in turn is actually a person of conscription age, will never in his life be labeled as a draft dodger. Let's put it this way, no one will ever label him like that. Yes, because he works in a government institution and spends 600,000 on logos. And the question actually, friends, for you is, how reasonable do you think this is? Nowadays, are such expenses from a state-owned enterprise, which is unprofitable and constantly requires Ukrainian taxpayers to spend their money so it can keep operating, really justified? And in general, does a person like Smilyanskyi, who actually communicates with his direct employee, with the people of Ukraine, in this way, really have the right to hold this position? Because it seems to me for this kind of rude communication, a person should immediately resign, and then there should be some sanctions regarding this. Because communication between the authorities and citizens has now turned into something, well, it's communication on the level of, designers, like people hanging out in garages or at the markets. I can't put it any other way. Calling a woman a prostitute in public when you're a government official, the head of a state enterprise, is unacceptable. Well, in my opinion, there should have been some kind of reaction. Will there be any reaction in Ukrainian society today? I don't think so. Because right now, the entire information space is built in such a way that people who actually think, who are adequate, are marginalized and made into some kind of laughingstock. That's how the system works. But those fools, there's no other way to call them, and all sorts of riffraff are tolerated no matter what they do. Unfortunately, that's the situation we have. What do you think about this? Write in the comments. It will be very interesting to read your opinion. Have a great day. See you next time.